Our webinar today is called Meeting Planning Masterminds, part of a series, Catering Confidential, with Tom Pasha. Tom is the founder and CEO of Contact Planning, and he's also one of our main presenters for the Meeting Planning Mastermind series. We are Nifty Method. We're a marketing, creative, strategy, and events firm. I'd like to introduce Tom Pasha. Again, like I said, founder and CEO of Contact Planning. So Tom has been in the hotel and planning industry, catering operations, all kinds of stuff, as director of sales in many locations, Orlando, Houston, Chicago, and more. Responsible for driving over 40 million in catering sales during this time as the director of sales there. I love this, Tom. You call yourself an executive steward, head dishwasher, which I love. Managing teams of over 60 employees in a hotel with 5 banquet kitchens, which I can imagine is just insane. So we're really excited to hear from Tom today to talk about a lot of what happens behind the scenes and a lot of things that as meeting planners, as folks on the branding side or the agency side, I know that you're going to find value in this. You're going to love hearing from Tom. Here's some high-level takeaways. If you didn't get a chance to read all the deep notes we had in the invite, Tom's going to get into all of this. I'm not going to read them, but they're here for you so you can get into it. But I don't want to jump ahead of Tom and his content. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Tom.
Thanks for everyone for coming, by the way. Should be a good show. I just did a 3-day version of this called the Meeting Planning Mastermind, where I actually put meeting planners to work in a hotel. And it's a lot of fun. They really enjoy that. And but we talked catering is one part of it, but today's show is primarily catering, just because it's one of those areas I don't think we spend nearly as much time as we should kind of addressing. Basically, the way this works, we're going to go through it. There's a ton of content. I intentionally overwrite all of this stuff. There's more stuff than we can realistically cover in just an hour. So do be sure to take a copy of this, read through it. There's a lot of stuff in this presentation that the people on this call probably already do. But there's probably a lot that you could probably add to your toolbox, something you can do better, a little bit better to make yourself a better negotiator and a better planner. And it's worked out very well in that I actually will kind of introduce myself now. And then just basically as far as my introduction, Tom Pasha started in hotels since age 15, which is quite a ways ago. And I'm here actually from Orlando. I'm a BD before Disney. So before Mickey and Minnie and Donald, everyone else arrived here, I was here. And then my first hotel job was when I was a kid. And then I worked my way primarily in the kitchen, a garde-manger. A garde-manger is called food prep. So I did all that work. A banquet sous chef, that's a person actually plates up the banquets. It helps plating up banquets. And a line cook, basically, you all start off in dishes or in the line cook. You have to learn how to cook short order to be able to do any of this. And in the course of the operations, I left that and then got with Hyatt Hotels, and I worked at 12 Hyatts over 20 years. So I was at the Hyatt Oakbrook, then O'Hare, Arlington, Baltimore, Houston, Greenville, Omaha, San Antonio, back to Chicago O'Hare, then back to HRC, that boutique hotel, 2,200 room bed and breakfast on Michigan Avenue. So I did the grand tour, and I actually started as a catering manager at O'Hare, starting off before I got into the sales route. And it worked out very well because you really learn how things work from the catering standpoint, is that once we order the food and service the food and serve the food, what's all going on backstage. And so I thought that is kind of an interesting way of looking at it. And the reason I look at it, I train planners from the hotel side, because anyone on this call, I actually recognize a number of your different names, but most meeting planning programs is meeting planners teaching meeting planners how to plan a meeting. And in my case, I'm a hotel guy, and a hotel guy teaching meeting planners how we really work can impart a lot more value to what we're about to talk about. So with all that in mind, again, if you have any questions as we go, be sure to bring them up. First of all, catering is critically important to hotels. We really need you to bring lots of catering to a hotel. As you might know, in hotels really make their money in rooms. We make 80% profit in a room. So if I have a $200 room rate, which is actually kind of inexpensive now, but if a $200 room rate, that means $160 of that is profit, which is incredible. And then by the same token, if I have 80% in rooms, I still have 40% in food and beverage. So it's not as big as rooms, but I need catering in order to fill the rooms upstairs. And the reason I do that, I have to have good catering because as a hotel guy, again, I'm a Hyatt guy, for example, but I competed with Hilton and Marriott and Sheraton and Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons and everyone on a daily basis. And I would fight for group business because group business is much better business for my hotel than individual travel. So what I'd have, kind of look through this. Hotels depend on groups, meetings, and conventions. Groups are revenue drivers. We get catering, golf, spa, and gaming all out of groups. We typically don't get any of those from individual travel. Catering, as I said, is 40% profit. So if I'm selling a $50 breakfast and a $60 lunch and an $80 dinner, that's a lot of money, goes right to my bottom line. And so I'd want to go with groups that have good catering. A lot of times with the people on this call, if you want to make yourself to have a more attractive piece of business, what happens is a lot of times you'll speak with the sales manager and they'll say, well, I got to review the booking with my team. And they have a business review meeting where actually they evaluate your meeting as it compares to other meetings that are competing for that same space. If you can do, as I said here, a Sunday or Monday arrival, that gives you a lot of leverage. As a hotel guy, we would fight, especially Sunday arrivals. Not everyone can do a Sunday arrival, but if you can, you will have amazing leverage because I used to say I had 52 problems a year. I call them Sundays. So if I can fill those Sundays, I'm golden for the rest of the week. So think about that. And then also think about how you can maximize your catering. Because unless you have a ton of golf or a ton of casino work, that sort of thing, catering is probably the second largest revenue driver in the hotel other than rooms. So do everything you can to maximize catering because that's the sort of thing where when my sales managers would bring me a piece of business, I would say, what is the catering spend? And one with the best spend won the business. Add catering to have hotels compete for your business. Solicit sponsors. Actually, I do a lot. In hotels, we actually have a division called ICW managers. It's in conjunction with managers. And what we would do is have our major clients, we would call them and ask, do you have any suppliers or sponsors we can solicit? Because we want them to sponsor hospitalities and dinners and events, because if they do those, it's a better piece of business for us. So if you have that already in your toolbox, be sure to think about that, where you can maximize catering, because that's the sort of business we hotel guys want. Convention hotels are designed with meeting space to fill rooms and sell catering. A normal hotel is basically built for 100 square feet of meeting space per guest room. So if I have a 500 room hotel and 400 rooms would be group rooms, of that I need about 40,000 square feet of hard wall meeting space. And that's how I determine what's a good piece of business. Do they have catering and are they in that 100 square foot ratio? It's all very important. That's how we evaluate a piece of business. But most importantly, think of this, everyone on this call, you now have the cookie. You have the power to negotiate a lot better than you did even a couple years ago, because we got beaten as a company or the country and as an industry over the last 2.5 years. We are all trying to get the revenue back. But there is something we rooms guys kind of make a joke about. We call food and beverage, F&B. It's the L side of the P&L. A P&L is called the profit and loss statement. And the thing is, we say we have so much sales in food and beverage. Why can't we keep more of it? The major things, well, we're going to talk about it now, is that an outlet, if I have an outlet, which is a coffee shop, a restaurant, a bar, any of the commercial retail areas of food and beverage, I might make 15% profit. That's actually very good. Banquets, as I said, that makes 40% profit because I'm coming out with massive amounts of food, massive amounts of labor and everything else, but we do have a very significant markup and we try to deliver a real quality product. So again, we do have a 40% profit. Food and beverage is much more labor and materials expensive. In rooms, the rooms department, basically 10% is your labor cost. 10% is about it, and that's easily done, covers every housekeeper, every night cleaner, everybody at the front desk. 10% is about it. Food and beverage is 40%. 40%. So 40 cents of every dollar I bring in just makes the payroll, because I don't have cooks. As it says here, I don't have any cooks. I have an executive chef, and he or she probably came from Europe, is making over 200, 300 or more thousand a year, making a ton of money. But when you hire an executive chef, it's not just that one person. He or she has a whole team of sous chef, saucier, garde manger, all the different positions in the kitchen. And typically when you hire a chef, you get all of his or her team with that person. And then because they have very high payroll, they also have very high benefits. So the labor involved is just crazy. And then also ingredients. We can't use, actually Marriott tried it. They tried to do sous vide, which was the little plastic, I don't know if you've ever seen these things, but a little plastic container of, say, chicken breast, all set in these little plastic liners. It was gross. But they tried to do it for a couple of years and they got beaten because Bill Marriott at that point said nobody pays attention to banquet food. Turns out he was grossly wrong on that. And then actually, we did the same thing. We tried to do it with coffee. We tried to do it very cheap coffee, and we got burned. We got amazingly bad letters, and so we had to go back to regular coffee after that. But what we'll do at a hotel, everything's got to be fresh. It's all got to be baked there. It's got to be in-house butcher. All the food prep, everything's got to be on site, and then that's all overhead. In the equipment, the promotions, the advertising expense, all of that costs a ton. They said I was a head dishwasher at the Hyatt Regency O'Hare. We had 5 kitchens. I had 60 to 80 guys in my department doing nothing but doing dishes. One dish machine's a $50,000 piece of equipment. And these guys could take it apart and put it back together continuously as needed just to make sure it was maintained correctly. So in any event, that's why we say that food and beverage, does not make the same as rooms, but 40% profit is actually pretty good. But if I'm making total profit as 25% for all the food and beverage, the 40%, the more that I put in banquets, the more I'm going to be able to drive revenue. But most important thing, the catering is a huge part of the master account. Actually, nowadays, it's almost all your master account. And it's amazing because years ago, it was kind of a sideline. We didn't really concentrate much on it from a hotel standpoint or from a meeting planner standpoint. Now, I mean, I just wrote a check for $200,000 just to cover the catering. It was 200 people for 3 days. It was over 200 grand. And it's a big piece of business. And that's, again, 40% profit. So they made 80 grand on that. So they did very well. That particular hotel did really well on that particular booking. So the people on this call realize that the people on this call can negotiate this. Don't be afraid to use the leverage. If you walk away from this show with nothing else, just think about that you've got the leverage where you can negotiate and use your negotiating power to get the best deal. A couple of things. Meals, breaks, and receptions are all huge expenses. Negotiate them when you negotiate your contract. Okay, I always get a banquet menu. I always try to get, if I have a group that is catering basically limited, either that they've got a budget or they've got certain things they have to serve or not serve. I always make sure that's in the contract. On your RFP, I ask for the floor plans, catering, and audiovisual menus. I want them in the file because the last thing I'm going to do is sign a contract and not know how much a coffee break is going to cost or what is lunch going to cost. Because some of these, I think my championship was the Hilton in San Francisco. It was $150 plus for a gallon of coffee. So it was $200 out the door for a gallon of coffee. There's 20 cups in a gallon. So it's basically $10 per cup of banquet coffee, which typically is not that great anyway, but they can get it. You're in San Francisco. So before I sign any contract, I want to make sure exactly what I'm ordering and then how the plus might work. And then as for that, when you meet with your sales manager, this is interesting. Meet with your sales manager, speak with a catering manager, meet your catering and convention service manager. Because sometimes once it's booked with sales, they'll turn it over to catering or turn it over to convention services. Ask the sales manager how that goes. And whichever one it is, you want to meet that person because everybody on this call knows in all likelihood, you'll book it with the salesperson. But when it comes time, when the group actually comes in, the sales guy is typically gone. Okay, the convention service and catering people typically stick around a little bit longer. So go ahead and meet those people. Make sure you click with them. And I always say, if you see where you're not getting along, or they seem that they're too strict, or whatever it might be, if it's not the right feel, you may want to look at another hotel. I think it's a really important because it's not the sales guy, because when you buy a car, you talk to the sales guy, but when you need the car serviced, you take to the service person. And that's the person you want to make sure you're clicking along with when it comes time to execute your meeting. Basically, catering managers and convention service managers have sales and upselling goals. So they are going to sell you and then going to try to upsell you. And in all my hotels, we actually say, what is the automatic sale? What's your baseline? And how much can you upsell that to? because that's how we negotiate. We don't want to just take what's in the door, just take whatever money or take whatever sale we can. We want to maximize it. Okay, so think about that as a hotel person. That's how we're trained. So the people on this call realize that you're going against people who are working with people who are trained to negotiate and upsell your sale. So they want to make sure they maximize your sale, maximize your revenue in all those states. A couple things to maximize and managing your catering. Negotiate the pricing and value-added items. I'll talk about that in a second. And it is amazing though, people say, I can't negotiate catering. Yes, you can. And the most important thing is, and actually somebody asked about this, can you negotiate after the contract signed? Typically not. It's not really negotiation. You could ask for a favor and ask for a discount, negotiate a couple of things there. But realistically, once it's signed, there's not a whole lot you can do. It is a lot better to negotiate up front. And I've got a couple of things, either negotiate a percentage off discount is always good, or a price fix menu with the exact menu pricing and the exact item we want to serve. I put that in my contracts to any group that is kind of budget conscious on this, but they don't realize they are going to negotiate and try to negotiate you up. Also realize, before we move on to the next part, is that all hotels have the first quote, a fallback position, and a lose it rate. So it's a first quote, a fallback position, and a lose it rate. That if they give you the first price and you bite on it, you're done. If you ask them to, if they can do better, then maybe they can do a little bit better. And if they say, well, if you can't do better, I got to go down the street, then they will see about that. But in each case, make sure you don't go with the first bid. Negotiate, and don't be afraid to negotiate, because I have saved my clients thousands and thousands. Actually, this week, I've saved my clients thousands of dollars just by being a little bit tougher than the sales manager wanted me to be. So it does work. So negotiate pricing and value-added items, number one and two, and then wrap up in accounting. Most important things, after you got all this stuff negotiated, I bet half the banquet checks I see have problems. I bet they're not posted correctly, or the number isn't right, or the pricing isn't right, or the guarantee isn't right. There's something wrong. And I have gone through, and actually I had another client that I saved about $30,000 for this week, just by going through their banquet checks. So think about that. The main thing is you realize that you have the power to negotiate. Don't be afraid to negotiate. And then once you've negotiated, make sure it's complete and correct. And then the most important thing is negotiate catering pricing. Okay, we talk about how to do pricing. There's actually a couple questions. Be serious. Oh, somebody says F&B service fees are negotiable. Yes, they are. Okay. The way this works on a hotel P&L is that if you got food cost or food sales and subtract food cost, you have food profit, right? And beverage sales minus beverage cost is beverage profit. Okay. For service charge, you could be 24%, but there's no assigned expense to that 24%. If you put 10,000 on the top line, you get to put 10,000 on your bottom line. Okay, it doesn't magically go to the banquet staff. It doesn't magically go to the kitchen crew, unless it's some union situation, and there's 2 or 3 hotels in the country that have that, or one of the old resorts like the Pinehurst, that sort of thing. Aside from that, that service fee goes right to the bottom line. And what they do is there's nothing controversial about it. They basically call the competition. And if they're hearing 22, 23, 24% from their competition, they will also go to that number. So you come in and say, I need to say, I had one that came in, started at 24%, and I got them to 20%. So I saved 4 percentage points, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you deal with 200,000 in catering, it turns out to be a lot of money. So it is negotiable. Just be sure to ask for it early on. And I actually have that in my contracts on my RFP, that the service charge is not to exceed 20% or 22%. And that's very important. I actually do that a lot with any of my groups that have kind of a budget issue. Also, make sure that you tell the other thing while you're negotiating, I tell each hotel that they're being shopped. And then I'll tell them who I'm speaking with at the other hotels, because guess what? We hotel guys, we keep in touch with each other, and actually we hire each other and everything else. So if I know you're talking to the Marriott guy down the street, I will try to beat him, just because being the competitive person that I am. And that's fairly typical. So think about all that. Like I said, the catering, food and beverage revenue in a hotel, that's the only part we get to keep. Catered food is 40% profit. Catered beverage is 75% profit. I get to keep actually closer to 80%. of every dollar I touch. So if I bring a $10 beer, I get to keep $8 of that. And a $10 beer is what we're seeing in a lot of hotels now. So negotiate, a couple ways to do this, and circle this particular slide. You may want to check with your people and see, are you doing this? Are you negotiating aggressively and asking for this stuff? Because hotels will do it, but you got to know to ask. And if you're there with 10 rooms and a coffee break, realistically, it's not big enough to really get involved in a lot of discounts. But for a larger group, a big annual meeting, that sort of thing, the more you bring to me, the more negotiable things I can be. Because I will get with my director of catering, my executive chef, and see what I can do to get your business to my hotel, because I don't want it to lose it to the hotel down the street. So a couple of things, I said, negotiate percentage discounts. 10 or 20% is common. Make sure when you do that, though, when you have a negotiating a 10 or 20% discount, is it a discount off the current menu for the future date, or is it a discount off the current menus of that date? So ideally, what I try to do is that it's 10% off the current menus for next year's program. So make sure that's spelled out in your RFP, that you want a 10% discount off current menus for the 2023 event. That's very important. You can do very well. And then the most important thing is make sure you have a copy of those menus in your kit so that you can see that you are getting that discount. Again, I saved my client, another client, large amount, 15, 20,000 just by doing that. So it's very important. You can do it. Meet with the chef and the catering manager. Okay. Ask them to customize. Thing is also, not everybody knows this, but we get real bored in the kitchen. Basically, we're always doing a chicken breast. We're always doing, some stew. We're always doing a pasta. We're always doing something easy and not real creative. If you can be a little creative, ask us, see what we can do. See, what's on special, what's a seasonal special, what's lighter, cool, or fun, or interesting that you can get a good deal on. And with that in mind, the chefs love that stuff. So be sure to ask and get the chef involved. And he or she don't get challenged that often, and they really enjoy it when they do. Meet with the chef, catering manager. A couple things to ask for: seasonal menu. For some reason, I had somebody order a lasagna luncheon in Chicago, is in LA for a program just a couple weeks ago. I said, why are you eating lasagna in July in LA? That's silly. So what they did was we went to a seasonal menu, something a lot lighter, farm to table, action stations, choice of entree, dual entrees. All of that can be done, and chefs love that stuff. And a lot of times you can get a better deal just by asking them to kind of challenging what else they can do. Current pricing for future bookings, talked about that already. Make sure that's spelled out very specifically. Menu matching. And menu matching, that's what I did when I was a catering manager. And what we do is, if Wednesday we already had a big lunch being served and everyone got cheesecake for dessert, any other group we had that day got cheesecake for dessert, because we are not going to do a separate dessert when I have got already 500 cheesecakes going out. I want to do another 500 because I can save all that time and labor and production just by menu matching. So the people on this call, if you want to save a couple bucks, ask to see what else is being served that day. Can you match that menu and get a discount? And I, again, have saved my clients thousands of dollars just by asking one question. Okay, so I had somebody mention that they'd like to meet with the chef. And it's also, something with the chefs, I always like doing this because I like walking back into the kitchen and just listen and go back to the kitchen. It should be quiet and clean. And you shouldn't be, I've been in some hotels where you hear all sorts of language and all sorts of yelling around and messing around. And that's not a good, whatever the back of the house looks like, that's the kind of look your front of the house is also. Okay. So if you have a clean, quiet, professional back of the house, that's a really good kitchen. Okay. And I always like doing that and meeting the chef ideally back and when I was in sales, I would actually take my clients back into the kitchen just as we were pulling the baked goods out of the oven. And that was fabulous. So they would love stuff like that. I'd put them to work sometimes just putting on frosting just to say that they did that. So think about that. If you can get back there and meet with the chef, that works very well. Somebody asked, how do you get past the CSM? Just say you'd like to meet with the chef. And I have never had a CSM saying, you can't meet with the chef. You want to have the CSM, the convention service manager, with you, but just say you'd like to meet the chef. It's one of those things you always do. I also like to look at it because if I have to use the loading dock, which I typically do, I want to find out where the loading dock is to get to the ballroom, because I've got freight and crates and everything else coming through also. So I got to make sure that I can make that happen. So I just ask, and I've never been turned down, actually. Couple of things, again, menu match, we talked about that. Also another one, ask for a nonprofit. If you have a nonprofit, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations on this call. Ask, maybe there is a nonprofit menu. Maybe there is actually the one for, was it Ritz-Carlton? They call it the pineapple menu. And pineapple is the symbol of hospitality. And basically, smaller portions of Ritz-Carlton quality food. So it's very, very good, but it's at a little bit of a discount. So it's not, as same it's not a massive discount. You're still are at a Ritz-Carlton, but they do have that available. But be sure to ask for it. Say it's a nonprofit, a veterans group, an educational group, social service group, senior or junior menu, any of that stuff. A lot of times they can customize something like that. As for a seasonal special, again, I talked about that's the lasagna luncheon. I thought that was silly. A lot of times you can do a salad or a light sandwich or something besides a massive entree and starch or two vegetables, a monster menu for what should be a light meal. Someone wrote, I meet with the banquet chefs at each hotel because they say my theme, this is my theme. What can you do? Okay, I think that's great. If you meet with a banquet manager, and we'll talk about this a little, actually, just a second, but I always like to see if you want to negotiate pricing, but you can also negotiate value added items. So get with the banquet manager, say, I want something cool and fun and interesting. What do you recommend? And a lot of times they can help you out at no expense at all, no added expense in least. So it is something to definitely think about to stretch your budget. Again, we hotel guys get bored. So if you want to challenge us, it's kind of fun. We do enjoy it. We will take care of you. Negotiate, again, confirm exact menus of price on your contract. I have a lot of religious groups and veterans groups in particular need a confirmed price, that they will have a $40 inclusive dinner price to serve whatever the item might be. Sometimes the hotels, I get a kick out of this, hotels will say, well, we can't guarantee it. We don't know what we're going to serve, which is kind of silly because there are no new animals. It's going to be a beef or a chicken or a pig or something. It's going to be a regular animal of some sort. There's not going to be some new entree out there. So anytime you need that in your contract, again, people on this call, don't be afraid to ask for it. You can get it. And negotiate the service charge. Like I said, anything from 20 to 24% is what you'll hear. Be sure to get it down to 20 or 21 or whatever you can do, because if you can do that, you're saving money directly on that, because most of that 1% plus, a lot of times you've got the menu item plus the service charge and then taxes on top of that. So you're actually saving the money on the tax that goes on top of the service charge. So make sure you're doing all this stuff. And again, people on the call are probably doing it now, but you can do it. I always check to see what can you do a little bit better. Okay, talk about pricing. Also, you can negotiate value-added items. Value-added items are comps and upgrades charged back to the hotel at no cost, okay? Not retail. Okay, a couple things to do is that number one, before we get into this, every sales department has got an S&P budget, a sales and promotion budget. So you can ask the hotel to sponsor a wine toast. You can have them sponsor an hour reception. I used to give a comp reception for any Sunday arrival, and I didn't promote it that way. But if I had a group that was trying to decide whether to do a Sunday or Monday arrival, if they moved to a Sunday, I would comp the reception. I would pick up the whole tab, and it was in San Antonio, so we did the chips and salsa and the sombrero and the whole, fiesta look, and all it was charged against me was at cost. So I had over $2 million budget at the Hyatt in San Antonio to do nothing but buy stuff for my clients. And every Hyatt, Hilton, Sheraton, Marriott, Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, everybody has the same thing. So don't be afraid to ask. Called the S&P, the sales and promotion budget. If you want to, if you're bringing group there, say, I want the hotel to sponsor the wine or do a champagne toast or do an opening reception. If you ask, they will do it. But you got to negotiate it. It's got to be a fair good piece of business. But they would much rather, in my case, I would much rather comp that reception than discount the room rate. Because if I discount the room rate, that's 80% profit I'm saying goodbye to, versus my just picking up a margarita party, which doesn't cost me in the big picture anything and helps my P&L. So that's real important. So the people in this call, think about that you can have the hotel sponsor part of your event. Couple things. Value added items to negotiate. Okay, centerpieces. I love this. When people do a centerpiece, I'm paying $65, $70 or more plus for a dinner, chicken dinner. Okay, $70 plus, which is about par these days. And they say, oh, we're going to charge you for a centerpiece. said, no, if I got 10 people on that table with $700 per table eating a chicken dinner, then I want the hotel to pick up the centerpiece. And it could be a mirror tile, votive candles, a floating flower, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you should be able to get that just by asking for it. Props, themes, linen, napkin upgrade, buffet lights, up lights, logo decor. In pretty much all the major hotels, we have a closet of props and linen and all different things. So we can always do a seafarer theme, or we do a Mexican theme, or do an Italian theme, or do whatever we want to do. We do have props like that. So be sure to ask, what do you have where we can jazz up this buffet? What do we have that's cool, fun, and interesting to make it? And just by asking for it, again, we hotel guys will say, well, hey, let's do that. Because again, it's something interesting. We've not pulled out the props in a couple months. Okay. The other one, easel, stanchions, risers, podium flags, and backdrops. A lot of hotels used to give those during regular meeting. And now a lot of hotels are trying to increase their revenue by now renting these. So an easel that spends this whole most of its life leaning against behind the door in the banquet manager's office, once it goes outside, it's $50 a day rental. So what you want to do is make sure, if you want any of those items, easel, stanchion, riser, podiums, props, any of that stuff, make sure you ask for that in advance. Put that in your RFP. I do a whole seminar on RFPs, and that's a huge thing now, because I've had some hotels, they want to charge me $20 to $50 a day plus for a podium. And it's a podium again. And in one case, it was in very sad condition, and they want to put this in front of my general section. It was in awful condition. And so I said, let's at least go back and see another podium that's not in bad shape. And we found one. And then we also was able to comp it. So be sure to ask for that. Drink ticket or house wine included with dinner. Again, you ask for it. It is charged against my sales budget, which is fine. I'd much rather buy everybody in the room a glass of wine than discount the room rate. So all you've got to do is talk to your catering convention service manager, and actually talk to your sales manager. You want the hotel. I have several groups where I've had the hotel put in the contract as an incentive for a Sunday arrival that the hotel agrees to sponsor a complete reception. And that works every time I've asked for it. Sundays, as I said, are extremely difficult for hotels. And upgraded desserts. I ask for that. Is that if I have a group that they're kind of bored, I had the one that every day was the same 3 or 4 cakes. 3 or 4 cakes on the buffet, and the client just was having a big problem with it. I had to grab the chef and I said, we need to mix this up a little bit. We need to do some different things on these desserts. And he didn't know there was a problem. So because he didn't know, it wasn't aware. So we made some changes. Be sure to ask for and negotiate all this stuff. Someone asked, love these ideas in negotiation, working in time coming out of COVID. Yes, they really are. And the most important thing is, if you tell a hotel that say that I'm most interested in Chicago, if I say Chicago, then all the hotels in Chicago know who they're competing against. But if I say I'm going to look at Chicago and Indianapolis and Milwaukee, well, you got 3 different price points, all very comparable, and actually some very nice hotels in all 3 cities. But the thing is, I always say, I don't want a price, I want a good value. And hotels are trying to make up for all the tons of COVID money that they lost. We went from a massively great year in 2020 to the worst year in history. It was like March 15th, the whole world ended in the hotel industry for the rest of the year, and just slowly started coming back in mid 2021. So now everyone's trying to maximize revenue coming back. So take a look at some of these that you see on this list. You probably already do. And there's probably some you say, wait, I can negotiate this one. Because again, I have put every one of these in negotiations and gotten them from my clients. A couple of things, new items, which is actually a good segue from this one question we had. Recovering from COVID, hotels are aggressively working to maximize revenue using addendums, hidden fees, and trap clauses. Okay, addendums, house policies page. Be sure to read that. That used to be basically a nothing. Talk about where to ship your boxes. There's nothing, little nothing thing at the back. Be sure to read addendum A or the house policy page in the back. And typically, a lot of hotels are now saying you have to initial that. Make sure that there's no little hidden charges in there. I've seen things where if I have a truck pull up that over 20 feet, I have to have a truck liaison person, or I have to have somebody at being paid $50 an hour to watch the loading dock during my loading, and all different things. So make sure, read that first, because hotels are trying to maximize. I think during the shutdown, all the accounting offices kind of sat in the room trying to figure out how they can maximize revenue without doing anything extra. So think about that, the entire addendum A. Also request an entire agreement clause. Ask for that specifically. And every hotel's got that in their library of clauses. You got to ask for entire agreement clause, which means basically neither the hotel cannot add any fees or charges or of any sort without mutual consent after the contract signed. Because I've had hotels say, okay, now we have a resort fee, or no, we have a parking fee, or now we have, we've gone from 20 to 24% for our service fee. And all of those items basically goes directly to their bottom line. But be sure to circle that an entire agreement fee. Be sure to avoid, as I said, porterage fees. Hotels are going back to this, where it's a mandatory $18 to $20 per person each way or round trip, and they put that on the master account. Okay, at a big hotel, porterage fees where they, it started off in the big resorts where people would bring 3 and 4 suitcases and golf clubs and tennis rackets and all this, where they were moving a lot of equipment. Now, most of your people are there with a wheelie bag and a laptop. So not even a laptop most of the time. But now they don't need that. So make sure that doesn't somehow slip into the contract. A resort fee, the same thing. I've had, especially if you go to Las Vegas, you get a $59 room rate with a $49 resort fee. And it's amazing. And resort fees work exactly the same way as public room rental and service charges. If you put 10,000 at your top line, you get to put 10,000 on your bottom line. There is no deduction on a resort fee. So it's basically unaccounted for income. Oh yeah, love these ideas. Okay. Oh, well said. Seeing as the properties I've worked with, yeah, attempting to charge shipping and handling fees have been common. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. With that, there's some shipping and handling, there's some labor involved. I always try to get maybe the first 500 pounds free. And if I know I'm shipping, I might say the first 50 boxes or the first 500 pounds or whatever it might be, I'll try to get that included in the RFP. And typically I can get that also. But look out for that, the house policies and the addendums. And then also the hidden fees. Read those banquet menus. Those first couple pages of the banquet menus are the house policy pages. And it says stuff like service charges, that it's a 20 to 24%. Realize that is negotiable because actually it's the entree price plus the service fee plus the tax on both. So it actually gets real expensive very quickly. COVID cleaning fees. I've seen a few of those. Just avoid those. That's just a pure money grab. There's nothing. They are not paying some housekeeper any extra to wipe down the podium. That's going right to the bottom line. Okay, staffing. I think bartenders, I don't like paying for bartenders. When I was a bartender, once I poured $500, I was free. And that's what you should have in if you have a group that's a good drinking group, you should be able to say, I'm not paying for bartenders. When they get to a total of 500 per bartender, they're comp. Okay, chefs. The same thing with chefs. You have a carving chef outside at $100. The chef doesn't get the $100. That goes right to the bottom line because now it's 100 plus, so it's 132 out the door, and that chef does not get any of it. The only difference between the chef carving in the kitchen and carving in front of people, he might have a clean shirt on. Because basically that's it. But I fight that because I'm still ordering a prime rib, or I'm still ordering a steamship round or whatever I've ordered, and having a carver there, again, he is still making the same money. So I don't want to pay for him. Okay. Security, the same idea. A lot of times it's just somebody's brother, who's some big guy who's, between jobs. So I try to avoid doing security. If I want security, I'll bring security in. I'll be real armed security. Servers, sometimes they say, well, to maximize, we have to add additional servers or have additional attendees on the buffet. I don't pay for those either because if I'm paying $65, $70 plus for a lunch buffet, the service should be included. Okay, it should be included in that 24% plus, and I should not be paying for additional servers. AV company exclusive, a service charge. If I'm bringing in, what I typically do is I want my AV to go out to bid with the AV company in-house plus others, and if the others get the bid, I want to be able to bring them in with no service charges. Make sure that's in there. Minimum service fees. Sometimes, and this is turning into a big deal, is that if they're 10 or more, 10 or less, or 20 or less, or even 30 or less, I'm seeing hotels trying to do 200, 250 plus as a service fee. And guess what? The banquet server does not get that money. It goes right to the bottom line. And the reason I know all this is called a GAAP, a generally accepted accounting principle. And what I'm saying is exactly how it works with these GAAPs. It's basically American Accounting Association, and it's standard, where if I am an owner and I have a Marriott, a Sheraton, and a Hyatt, all of the P&Ls are basically the same. I can't charge one thing one way and count things the other way. It's all got to be the same. So what you're seeing here is the insider look of how hotel accounting works. So be sure you realize that. These are things to look out for. We'll just kind of touch on these quickly. I have room department traps and food and beverage traps. These are things to look out for in your negotiations, your RFP and your negotiation and your final contract. Okay. Room traps, 1 per 40 comp on a cumulative basis. Some hotels are saying day by day. You want it cumulative. 1 2-bedroom suite. And some hotels will say only over the peak days of the event. You don't want that, because if it's a suite upgrade, typically it's going to your VIP and he or she's coming in early and leaving late. So you have to put in the arrival and departure day for those VIP suites. Room rate, single, double, triple, quad. Some they say single, double is one rate, triple and quad is another rate. What you should do is one rate all the way across. Again, that's another trap. Complement your wireless internet in all guest rooms. Sometimes it's like 1 meg, which is not fast enough for anything. And so what you have to do is find out that their standard internet is enough bandwidth where it's worthwhile. Guest rooms accepted at the cutoff at the group rate. And so right there, I underline group rate based on space available, because a lot of hotels say that it'll be at their prevailing rate, which means rack rate. So that means your people, and it's typically the one person, your VIP speaker who registers late, he's the one that's going to get the wrong rate. So that's a problem. It's a trap that people on this call want to look out for. The hotel agrees to a group audit where they will take their guest list compared to your attendee list. So any attendee that went around the block, I don't care how they got there. I don't care if it's a comp. I don't care if it's a AAA points. I don't care if it's American Heart Association. If they're physically in the room in that building, you should get pickup credit towards that. So make sure you're getting that. Group rate available 3 days pre and post based on availability. And also some hotels say we don't credit that because it's above and beyond your dates. No, again, that person is in the building because they're there for your event. So you want to make sure they get that you get pickup credit on their room. A couple F&B traps, look out for these. First 500 pounds free. I always like that. I make sure that they just have this little grid that automatically every box I bring in is at full charge. I want the first 500 pounds. Typically I can get that. Comp meeting space with cumulative catering F&B. That's real important. Sometimes some hotels in the Caribbean and in Mexico and a lot of even Western resorts, they're trying to do day by day catering minimum. Hyatt and Hilton are just starting to do that now. So look out for that. Okay, 20% off audiovisual and catered F&B. The trap there is it off the current menus or is it menus of that particular future date? So as I said earlier, make sure that's very clearly spelled out. Comp meeting space. Okay, and I found that, and then I'm getting new on the West Coast is kind of interesting. Hotels are asking for a daily setup fee and a daily teardown fee, but they're not setting up or tearing down the meeting every day. They just have it in there. They don't want to say meeting or rental. They're calling it a tear down fee or a setup fee. So I don't care what they call it. It's still rental. So I want to make sure that is not, I'm negotiating that. A comp 1 hour reception. And what I'll do is I'll make sure if I do have the hotel comp a reception that I'm specifying what I'm going to get. Is it house pour, liquor, beer, wine, hot and cold hors d'oeuvres? Okay, I want to have it specifically laid out that it's not going to be bubbly water and Vienna sausages. It's going to be a real menu. Comp meeting space. So I talked about that. The hotel to allow contractors with no surcharge. We talked about that also. Make sure you're getting that in your contracts. The outside event fee. I always like this because you're actually saving the hotel time and labor by having an event outside their ballroom because they still have their ballroom to sell. And you should not be paying for an outside event fee. That should be just come if you're going to be at the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay out in San Francisco. Half the building is outdoors. So you should not be paying for outdoor meeting space. Guarantees due 7 days out. That's kind of silly. I always try to get them within, say, 2-3 days maximum. And then new rental fees. Look out for all of these. I'm seeing a lot of this: flags, podiums, lecterns, linen, stanchions, all that we talked about. Make sure that you're negotiating away from that. These are all things that I know that people on the call know, but I'm sure there's some that they are seeing that they are falling for. A couple other things, and just kind of read through these. A couple of these, if you want to save some money, skip the top shelf. House pour is okay. Okay, sometimes what I'll do is I'll put the VIP bottle will be stashed on some designated bar in the corner, but basically top shelf houseware is more than okay. Cash bar drink tickets, if you want to do that, you save a bunch of money there. Talked about this, negotiate bartender fees. You should not be paying for the bartender. Stand-up tables, lines at a bar, they're okay. 4 and 5 deep, that's a little much. 2 or 3, that's okay. Okay, order by consumption for Cokes and package items. Um, Coffee. As I said, I have a couple of groups that coffee is a big issue. And again, you go to some of these hotels, it's 125, 150 plus per gallon, and there's only 20 cups in the gallon. So what I'll do is I'll say I want to do off-brand coffee or private label coffee and $50 plus plus. And a lot of hotels can do that with you let them. Does it affect their bottom line at all? But it affects your bottom line a ton. Um, I don't do bottled waters anymore. I use pitchers or bubblers. I say we're going green. We're not going to add to the carbon footprint. Skip the salad and soup course for lunch. A lot of times it's all this production where all I do is just have the meal, get them back to work. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll serve the lunch dessert during the PM break. And that's real handy also. You can save a good amount of money for that. Had a question to see, what about outside event fees when hotels say the fees for labor to strike the pool furniture? Yeah, they don't pay the guys who are striking the pool furniture. They're putting it right in their pocket. Okay, there is no, but people signing up for that particular shift, they're going to end up moving furniture from ballroom A to ballroom B, or from the pool to the outside, or outside to the pool, whatever. They're not going to pay any incremental labor costs. So that's why I say, since there's no incremental labor cost, I should not have to be saddled with an expense. So I will say that. I'll also point out the fact that by me going out to the pool, they're able to resell that ballroom to another group. And a lot of times that's called the opportunity cost, as it were. So I let them know that I know how that works. And I don't get it all the time, but I get it pretty much most of it. I do get it most of the time, but not some hotels are dug in. They can't do it, but a lot of times they will. Okay, serve lunch, dessert, talked about that. Bartenders use pour spouts. If you see a free pour, that bartender is making some extra money on you because he's doing a heavier pour, getting a couple extra bucks for your attendees. And they're not going to admit it, but they are. Okay, action stations and server passed hors d'oeuvres, you can save a lot of money because if you do a standing buffet, people load the plate and they eat 2/3 of it and throw away the other third. If you use action stations and server passed, you'll end up saving a lot of money on that. As for discontinued wine brands, a lot of times hotels have cases of wine that basically they were replaced when Marriott went from one wine to another. Their cases of their Vendage was one, for example, and it's actually a very good wine, but they aren't able to serve it. So ask if they have a discontinued wine brand. Smaller plates, centerpieces, and this was my favorite is hide seafood is expensive. So if you got to do seafood at all, I'd hide it, stick it in the back there somewhere. Okay, and you can save a lot of money on that. Okay, so you now know more about food and beverage if you ever want to know. And do be sure to read through this stuff later on. This is how to negotiate, basically negotiate it, and then make sure you get it when it's comes time for the contract. Don't hesitate to ask what you need. The hotel needs your business. I said, we need your business. We need catering. Okay. Shop the hotels and tell the hotels are being shopped. Tell the hotels your decision date. Meet the GM. Circle this one, the GM and director of sales. Let them know how important it is. Meet your catering and CS manager. Make sure there's a fit there. Make sure you like them, they like you, everybody likes each other. Because sometimes I've seen major problems because maybe you like the sales guy, but he or she's going to be gone. So don't worry about them. I'd worry about the CS or catering person. I'll make sure that you and that person click because you are the two that are going to co-produce this thing. Negotiate in person. If you ever want a really good deal and it's a big deal, get on a plane and go see them because I've gotten much better deals face to face than I'd ever get on the phone. Negotiate at month end and quarter end. Hyatt and Hilton in particular do quarters and half years. So if you can negotiate something at the end of June, you are a rock star because the hotels will cut the deal. They will negotiate wherever they need, rates, dates, space, catering menus, whatever they need to do because they need to put your booking on the books effective July 1. So that is something real important. Circle that one also. What I'll do is I'll take all 20 points to be negotiated and negotiate them in order. If there's one that we don't agree with, they'll say, well, let's come back to that one. And we'll finish up the list. And then typically that last one goes away for whatever reason. It just was well, my 20 items, and one will get, back and forth. And then when it turns out that it's not that big a deal if it's the last one standing. I have the contract draft emailed to me in a Word document with changes tracked. I want to make sure it's very complete and correct, and I'm going to take some time to look at it. I'm not going to, they say I need it back today. No, I'll send it back when I'm ready to send it back. And most importantly is that people in this call, if you can flex your space, dates, and rates, you can have the hotel actually negotiate and compete for your business. And I did want to put this in. Somebody asked me about force majeure. How do I do this with force majeure? What about contracts for future? And every hotel now has a force majeure clause. What I did here, I have a kind of a hybrid force majeure clause. Make sure the stuff that I have here in red is what you see in your force majeure. So it's really important. Force majeure number one is called force majeure. It's a force above and beyond the control of either party. Do not go with impossibility. Impossibility is a legal concept that's impossible to prove. Okay, so a lot of hotels like to put that in because it is impossible to prove. And so if they put impossibility, say, no, strike that, it's got to be force majeure. Okay, and that is one, these are legal facts here. Okay, the performance required by either party under this agreement shall be excused and canceled at any time. So again, either party at any time, where there's no artificial time frame, or we're saying that the client could only do it to this date and the hotel could do it to that date. Either party at any time is fine. Okay, and then it's got the whole list of different things included about the World Health Organization, disaster, fire strikes, threats of strikes, or similar circumstances. Make sure that's included. Circle that, because that it's not to be that there's the all-inclusive, all-encompassing list. So there's going to be something that comes up that's similar, but it's not identical to what's in the list. That's real important. And economically impracticable, not impractical, but impracticable, which means there would be serious, significant economic problems resulting from consequences resulting from having to put together an event over these dates that would be subject to a force majeure clause. And again, either party may terminate, suspend, or partially perform. See, yeah, and then that in the event the group is able to do it, I just like putting this in. The hotel shall waive any and all fees, penalties, and other liabilities related to reduced size meetings. It shall offer attendees any lower room rates offered to other guests during the in-house dates. So if I'm able to do it in spite of a force majeure, and I do it, I want them to be able to waive any of those minimums. Because if I can do that, I might just be able to pull this off. But I don't want to get dinged for an attrition when I'm trying to do a meeting with, let's say, COVID or still going on. Okay, go ahead and take a look at that. That's real important. Okay, lastly, okay, I'll put that in. But for the last thing I said, make your accounting. Make sure that you are getting everything correct on your banquet checks. Get guaranteed menu pricing before you sign. Check your BEOs, okay? Check your BEOs. This is interesting. This one says bottle count at every reception. I don't know how many people do that. Typically, when I ask that for a group, not everybody does it. You can save a ton of money if you can do your bottle count. You go in there to find out how many was issued to each bartender, and then you go in there and you actually see how much was consumed. The way it works is kind of skip down a couple. It says 1/5. The way we look at it, we'll just hold up the bottle. Okay, 1/5, we divide that mentally into 10 tenths. We get 3 shots per tenth. So at $15 per drink, plus, that's $450 a bottle. Okay, retail. The cost is only $25, $30. So I've got a 7% beverage cost. So that adds up very quickly. So you want to be sure, especially if you have a group that is a good drinking group, make sure you are there and do the count. Also make sure you've not had too much to drink. But if you can be there and actually help them with count, just be there with it, that will keep them honest. Because again, in beverage, and I was in beverage, we would round up. I had one client though, that she was charged, every person in that room had 9 beers in an hour. And she showed me the banquet check. I said, there's no way, they padded the check. And so that's something that you can control. The other thing is I always like to do is review and sign banquet checks at every event. Food, beverage, audiovisual, check the math on each check. I'll just bring a little pocket calculator if needed, just to make sure the math is right. And 90% of the time it is not. So I want to double check that. So now we're all catering experts. We're a couple minutes late, but we're going to cover a ton of stuff. It is a fun part of the show. We hope you enjoy this part of the show. Is that be a bit of a foodie, learn some basic skills, take a class, read a book. It's kind of fun. It is fun to get into this. I'd like to spend time in the kitchen. Okay, I always like to see what during a site inspection I will ask the chef or ask my sales manager, instead of me ordering off the restaurant, can you have the chef plate one additional cover, whatever's going out today for lunch? So if they're plating up a banquet, I want to see that. I don't care. I know the restaurant food's going to be good. I want to see what the banquet food looks like, and I'll pay for that. Even if there's an issue, I'll pay for that. So I always ask for that, and I'd say most of the time I get it. I do like doing that. During a tour, ask to plate up a sample plate. Like I said, you want to see what the normal plate looks like. And basically start thinking like a hotel guy. Again, we are making money at 40%. It's very important to maximize that. So as the people in this call, you can be a much better negotiator and push hard and get your results by knowing how we look at it from a hotel side. And lastly, like I said, if there's anything I can do, please give me a call. I hope everybody enjoyed it. There's tons of stuff here. Please read through it. Again, you're going to have all sorts of stuff. And again, realize that there's a lot of the stuff you've already done. Some of the stuff you've probably not done. And so I would say highlight that, circle and number that so you have a short list of things you can accomplish. And again, I appreciate it. I hope everybody got a bunch out of this. And yeah, if you have any comments or have any questions, we'll keep the floor open here. Okay, somebody asked about a rebook clause, and I do like putting that in. Ask for the hotel, ask for a rebook and a resale clause. They're two different things. A rebook clause that if you have to cancel, that a portion of and you have to pay some sort of cancellation fee, a portion of that cancellation fee will be applied as a credit to a future group. That's the rebook clause. I always ask for a rebook and a resale clause, and be sure to ask for both.
Thank you again, Tom. We really appreciate it. We always love having you. I know we've done a few of these together, and it's always amazing information. So happy to have you. And we look forward to being back out there in the world now that things are, opening up again, and we can start putting some of these things in action.